I stood in the doorway of my brand new house in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, while my parents walked from room to room like inspectors sent to find faults. My mother counted bedrooms out loud, her voice clipped and precise. My father frowned, already irritated, like the place had personally disappointed him. Then my brother laughed and said the kids could take the bigger room. That was when my mom snapped and asked, loud and sharp, "So where do we all sleep?" The words hung in the air longer than they should have. The house went silent. My chest felt hollow, not shocked, not confused, just exhausted in a way that sank deep into my bones. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was entitlement. And standing there in that empty hallway, I realized the answer they expected was the same one I'd been giving my entire life, an answer I was no longer willing to give after years of paying for their comfort alone. Before I go any further, tap like and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if you've ever been treated like you owed someone space in your own life, share your story. It reminds me I'm not the only one. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31, and I make my living as a freelance graphic designer. Most days I sit in front of a screen adjusting colors, spacing, tiny details no one else notices until everything finally feels balanced. The irony isn't lost on me. I was always good at creating balance for other people, just never for myself. From the outside, my family looked normal. Sunday dinners, holiday photos, smiles that lasted long enough to be posted online. If you passed us in a grocery store, you'd never guess anything was wrong. But inside our family, there was an unspoken rule. Everyone seemed to understand, except me. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the safety net. My parents never said it outright. They didn't need to. It was always framed as concern. My dad talked constantly about his heart, about how stress could trigger something serious. My mom spoke softly, like every sentence carried worry she wanted me to absorb. "We just don't know how much time your father has," she'd say, lowering her voice. Every time she said it, my chest tightened. Fear has a way of making decisions for you before you realize you've agreed to anything. Then there was my brother, Mark, younger, louder, always chasing some new plan that never quite worked out. He had a family of his own, 2 kids who seemed to grow faster every year, and problems that somehow always landed on my parents' shoulders, and by extension, on mine. Mark never asked me for help directly. He didn't have to. My parents translated for him. They always had. Money became the background noise of our relationship. Payments here, bills there, nothing dramatic on its own, just often enough that it became routine. I learned how to budget around it, learned which groceries to skip, learned how to stretch a paycheck quietly so no one would worry. They rarely thanked me. Gratitude would have made it feel optional, and it never was. When I mentioned I was thinking about buying a house, the reaction was immediate. Not excitement, not pride. Relief. My mom started talking about the future in that vague way she used when she was about to ask for something. My dad asked questions about space, parking, school districts nearby. Mark joked about how nice it would be for the kids to have a yard. No one asked what I wanted. They spoke in plurals. We'll need room. The kids can't be cramped. Families should stay together. Every sentence carried the assumption that my first home wouldn't really be mine, that it would just be an extension of everything I'd already been providing. I remember sitting alone in my apartment that night, lights off, laptop glowing in the dark, listings open in front of me. Houses I could afford, houses that made sense. And for the first time, a thought surfaced that scared me more than disappointing them. What if I didn't build my life around their needs this time? The closer I got to buying, the louder my phone became. It started with casual check-ins, my mom asking how the search was going, my dad reminding me to take my time, but not too much time, Mark sending links to neighborhoods he liked, always with comments about school zones and backyard space. None of it sounded aggressive on the surface. That was the problem. It was all wrapped in concern, like a gift you didn't realize had strings around until it tightened around your wrists. One night, my parents invited me over for dinner. Nothing fancy, store-bought dessert, the kind of evening that pretends to be relaxed. We sat at the table, plates half full, conversation drifting until my mom cleared her throat. That was her tell. She folded her napkin slowly and said, "We've been thinking about how important it is for the family to stay together." I already knew where this was going. I just didn't know how far they planned to push it. My dad leaned back and nodded. He asked how many bedrooms I was looking at, whether I'd thought about how fast the kids were growing. Mark didn't say much. He didn't need to. He just smiled and scrolled on his phone like the outcome was already decided. I tried to keep my voice steady and said I was looking at places that fit my budget, places that made sense for one person. That word irritated them. One person. My mom frowned. "Family doesn't think that way," she said. Mark laughed. "You won't even notice us," he said. "We're used to squeezing in." That was when it clicked. This wasn't about help. It wasn't even about need. It was about ownership. They spoke as if my future address already belonged to them, like my name on the paperwork would just be a formality. The conversation escalated without anyone raising their voice. My mom listed reasons, emergencies, childcare. My dad brought up his health again, how stress could be dangerous if he had to move later. Mark mentioned how crazy rent was these days, like that settled everything. No one asked if I was okay with it. They were negotiating a life I hadn't agreed to live. I left early that night. I sat in my car with the engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding. I felt small, not because they were louder than me, but because they were so certain. They believed I would cave. History was on their side. Over the next few weeks, the pressure became constant. Texts asking for updates, suggestions disguised as jokes. My mom sent listings far above what I'd mentioned. Mark asked if the kids could pick their rooms. I stopped answering right away. The silence bothered them more than any argument would have. Then came the moment I stopped pretending this was still a conversation. My mom sent a message that said, "Just make sure it's big enough for everyone. We're counting on you." Counting on you. Not asking, counting. I stared at the screen for a long time, and for the first time, instead of guilt, I felt something colder and clearer. If I followed their plan, I wouldn't just be buying a house. I'd be locking myself into the same role forever. That night, I opened a new search filter and unchecked one box. Minimum bedrooms. 2 was enough. Once I made that decision, everything went quiet. Not peaceful, just still, like the moment after a door slams and you're waiting to see what breaks. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped responding to every message. The house search became something I did alone. Early mornings before work or late nights when the city outside my apartment had gone dark. That was when I found it. A small 2-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street. Nothing flashy, just clean lines, big windows, and a patch of sunlight that spilled across the living room floor like it belonged there. It felt manageable, honest, like a life that didn't require constant negotiation. I didn't tell my parents, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I knew they would try to rewrite the choice before it was even mine. I met with the lender, I read every page, I asked questions I'd never asked before. Ownership, liability, boundaries, words that had never existed in my family's vocabulary. Signing the papers was strangely emotional, not dramatic, just heavy. I sat there with the pen in my hand, thinking about all the times I'd signed off on things for everyone else without hesitation. Payments, bills, promises I hadn't realized were permanent. This time, my name meant something different. This time, it meant control. When the sale closed, I walked through the house alone. I opened the windows, I stood in each room and imagined nothing. No plans for guests, no mental math about who would sleep where, just space. 2 bedrooms, one for me, one that could be anything or nothing at all. The pushback started the moment my mom found out. She didn't ask how I felt, she asked how many rooms. When I told her, there was a pause on the line, the kind where you can hear someone recalculating. 2, she repeated, like I'd misspoken. That's small. My dad followed up with a call of his own. He said he was worried about emergencies, about the kids, about how cramped it would be for everyone. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I told him I understood his concerns. Then I didn't add anything else. The silence unsettled him. Mark was less subtle. He sends a message that said, "So where are we supposed to fit?" No greeting, no question mark, just assumption. That night, I sat at the kitchen counter of my new place, eating takeout straight from the container, the house still echoing around me. For the first time, the guilt didn't rush in. Instead, I felt something shift, like I'd stepped out of a line I'd been standing in my entire life. I wasn't cutting anyone off. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't making threats. I was doing something far more dangerous to them. I was choosing myself, quietly, and I knew they weren't going to accept that without a fight. They didn't ask to see the house. They announced it. My mom texted early that morning, something cheerful and forced about making it a family moment. My dad followed with a reminder that Mark and the kids would be coming too, as if that detail was non-negotiable. Mark sent a thumbs up emoji. No questions, no permission, just confirmation. I said yes anyway, not because I wanted them there, but because I knew this was the moment everything would either collapse quietly or explode in the open. I wasn't running anymore. I arrived early, unlocked the door, and let the house fill with air. The windows were wide open. Light spilled across the hardwood floors. The place smelled like fresh coffee and faint paint, clean and undecided. No photos on the walls, no clutter, just space that hadn't learned how to belong to anyone yet. Their cars lined up along the curb like they owned the street. My mom stepped inside first, purse tucked under her arm, eyes already scanning. She didn't say hello, she didn't hug, she evaluated. My dad followed more slowly, his mouth set in that familiar line of disappointment he'd perfected over the years. Mark came last, with the kids, loud and casual, like this was a vacation rental he'd already paid for. "Well," my mom said finally, looking around, "it's cozy." Cozy, the polite version of small. She walked past me into the hallway, opening doors without asking. Bedroom, bathroom, second bedroom. She stopped there, counting silently. Once, twice, then she turned back toward me. "So where do we sleep?" The question echoed, not just because of the empty walls, but because of how certain she was that it was a valid question, that it was something I owed them an answer to. Mark crossed his arms. My dad shook his head like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. I felt tired, deeply tired. Not angry, not scared, just done. "You don't," I said. Silence crashed down hard. Mark blinked. "What?" "You don't sleep here," I repeated. "This house isn't for that." My mom laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said. "I'm being clear." My dad stepped forward. "So you expect us to just visit and leave?" "Yes." "That's heartless," my mom snapped. "After everything we sacrificed for you?" I nodded slowly. "You mean everything I paid for?" Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's accurate." They all started talking at once. My dad brought up his health the way he always did when he felt cornered. Mark talked about how hard things were for his family, how expensive everything had gotten. My mom listed moments from my childhood like they were receipts I owed interest on. I let them finish. Then I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the folder I'd left there. "What's that?" Mark asked, already irritated. "Records," I said, opening it. "Payments, bills, support, everything I've covered over the years." My mom scoffed. "So what? We're family." "Family doesn't demand," I said calmly. "Family doesn't assume ownership." Mark leaned closer. "You're really turning this into a legal thing?" "I already did," I replied quietly, "to understand where I stand." My dad's face darkened. "You talked to a lawyer?" "Yes." "For what?" my mom snapped. "To protect myself," I said, "and to stop this." I slid the folder across the counter. No theatrics, just paper meeting wood. This house is in my name, fully, legally. There's no obligation for me to house anyone else, no requirement to make room, no expectation beyond what I choose. Mark laughed, but it sounded thin. "You think paperwork changes who we are?" "No," I said. "I think it shows who you've been." My mom's voice dropped. "You're choosing a building over your family?" I met her gaze. "I'm choosing boundaries over being used." The kids were quiet now. One of them tugged at Mark's sleeve and asked when they were going home. The word home landed heavy in my chest. This place, this quiet, this space, it was the first thing that had ever been truly mine. "You can't just shut us out," Mark said, his voice sharper. "We're your family." "I'm not shutting you out," I said. I'm stopping you from moving in." My dad looked genuinely shaken. "You're tearing us apart." "No," I replied. "I'm stepping out of something that was never fair." My mom looked around the room again, slower this time. The windows, the corners, the absence of extra beds. Her anger shifted into calculation. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "I know," I answered, "but this part is." I walked them to the door. No shouting, no dramatic exit, just footsteps and the door closing behind them. The click of the lock echoed louder than anything they'd said. I stood there for a long moment, heart racing, hands trembling. Then I laughed softly, not out of joy, out of relief. They came expecting space and control. They left with nothing. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in quiet ripples. My mom stopped calling. When she did text, the messages were careful, like she was afraid of crossing an invisible line. My dad left one voicemail about his health, then nothing. Mark tried once more, a long message about disappointment and loyalty. I read it without responding and deleted it. For the first time, their words didn't pull me back in. They didn't show up again. I heard things through relatives, how uncomfortable gatherings had become, how my parents complained without naming me, how Mark had to figure things out on his own. I didn't feel victorious. I felt distant, like I was watching a story that no longer belonged to me. Life in the bungalow settled into a rhythm. Morning light in the kitchen, quiet evenings without tension humming under my skin. I bought a small table and ate meals without rushing. I slept better. I stopped checking my phone, bracing for another demand. The biggest change wasn't my family. It was me. I realized how much space fear had taken up in my life. Fear of being selfish, fear of being alone, fear that love had conditions I had to keep paying for. Letting go of that didn't make me colder, it made me calmer. Sometimes at night, I stood in the doorway, looking down the hall at the two closed bedroom doors, and smiled. Not because I'd won something, but because for the first time, what I had was enough, and no one could take it from me. If this story stirred something in you, let me say this clearly. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel, it makes you honest. Love that only exists when you give everything you have isn't love, it's a transaction. Walking away from that isn't failure, it's survival. Like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, share it with friends who might need to hear it, and comment your perspective or the biggest lesson you took away. Your voice matters more than you think.